Well, hello there. I'm Poppa Jon, and I'm passionate about comic book movies, but I also love nothing more than to explore and analyze horror films. And so welcome to Heroes in Horror with yours truly, Poppa Jon. And we've got 3 topics to talk about today, because last week we got a Daredevil trailer for Daredevil Born Again. And then I also went out, I saw Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. I saw Wolfman. So yeah, if you enjoy Heroes in Horror, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button. If you're just hate Heroes in Horror, if you hate horror movies and superheroes and shit like that, you can hit the dislike button, I guess. And also share your thoughts in the comment section down below about Daredevil, Wolfman, and Peter Pan. Now let's throw the shit to the fan and get this shit started. Getting into Daredevil Born Again and the trailer from last week. I loved the trailer. I really dug it. You will see throughout this that I am not a trailer breakdown kind of guy. That's not who I am. I mean, sometimes I even avoid trailers altogether. But I had to check this out because, the Daredevil from Netflix, the Netflix's Daredevil, is an amazing, one of the greatest superhero, one of the greatest comic book television shows of all time, if not the best. I have my soft spot for a couple others, especially with me being more of a DC guy in terms of the characters I enjoy. But in execution, it's hard to argue against Netflix's Daredevil not being the best. When I heard they were going to do a continuation on Disney Plus, originally I was ecstatic, but then I looked at sort of the track record of Disney Plus as we were leading up to it, and it got me worried. And then there was something about actors and whatnot. They were displeased, I guess, with what was the original creative plan for Daredevil Born Again, and so they brought back some of the Netflix creators. They brought back Foggy and Karen and everybody. And I think that's definitely for the benefit. I really enjoyed the vibe that the trailer gave off. It does really look like they're basically going back to the same feeling. Like, there's a little bit in there where you still kind of get some of that MCU flair. But for the most part, it does feel like you're going to get back sort of to that Netflix, Marvel, Netflix, Daredevil spice. Because, I absolutely loved the whole Netflix Defenders, whole pocket universe thing. Absolutely, obviously, Daredevil was a big one. I was a big fan of Jessica Jones Season 1. Huge fan of The Punisher Season 1. And in terms of Iron Fist and Luke Cage, I loved Luke Cage's characters. I thought some of the writing can be iffy here and there. They got a little campy at points, but I do genuinely enjoy and love the Luke Cage series. With Iron Fist, I had fun with the first season, but it's not the best. But I thought the second season was a pleasant surprise. I actually really do love the second season of Iron Fist. And then the Defenders miniseries, I did not hate it as much as everybody else. Is it one of the best? No. But I got what I wanted out of it. So, I'm not going to complain. I enjoyed it for what it was. But the pinnacle of it is Daredevil Seasons 1 and 3. I think Season 2 of Daredevil, it's really, really good. Especially the Punisher stuff. Arguably the best episode, singular episode, or at least my favorite, might be from Season 2, even though the season is my least favorite of the Daredevil seasons. Still one of the best in the Netflix universe, but I still would prefer Jessica Jones Season 1 and Punisher Season 1 over Daredevil Season 2. But Seasons 1 and 3, those are top notch, especially Season 3. I think the Netflix pocket universe of Marvel was at its peak when it got canceled, essentially. I think there was like a really bad Jessica Jones season that released after Daredevil Season 3. But for the most part, it ended on a high, especially Daredevil. And so seeing those characters come back, I'm going to be nothing more than ecstatic. especially the Punisher. I was a huge fan of John Bernthal's The Punisher. If you don't know the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, I have it over down there somewhere. I actually have a shit ton of nostalgia for that movie. It was one of the first rated R movies I ever saw. I adore that movie for what it is. I don't think it's this perfect movie. I think it's a lot better than people give it credit for. And so I have a lot of nostalgia for the character of the Punisher because I have a lot of nostalgia for that original Thomas Jane movie. That being said, John Bernthal's depiction of the Punisher is sort of the definitive Punisher, and I think that first season for the Punisher, I think, is right up there with the best of Daredevil. The second season didn't need to happen. I think it works best as just a season one or miniseries type of thing. And so seeing Frank Castle in the Daredevil Born Again trailer, I can't wait to see him pop up. He was probably my favorite side character in Daredevil, especially season 2. Like, the best part of Daredevil was like the Punisher stuff, or at least my personal favorite stuff from the Daredevil series was the Punisher stuff in season 2, kind of like that first half of season 2. And then when you get into the second half with Elektra and the hand and all of that, it loses me, and that's why it's kind of a step down from seasons 1 and 3 as a whole. But that first section, man, I'm probably the only person that's more excited to see John Bernthal's Frank Castle than I am the actual Daredevil series. That being said, I'm extremely excited still to see the Daredevil Born Again series, especially when you watch the trailer. It is not shying away from like the carnage candy, not necessarily carnage candy in terms of like gore and everything, but there's an instance in the trailer where he breaks the guy's arm and you just see the bone popping through the skin and everything. They're not shying away from the R rating by the looks of it, hopefully. And they're trying to go back to that very darker edge that you had in those Netflix shows, especially with the Daredevil show. And I'm all for that. In terms of Wilson Fisk being a mayor, I'm a little concerned. It makes storyline sense. Storyline-wise, it makes total, utter, complete sense. He is one of those characters, much like a Lex Luthor, that you can easily throw into like a mayoral role, and it makes complete sense with the story and everything that they're portraying, and just the type of villains that they are, and how they're sort of the type of villain where the public a lot of times sees them as more of a hero, philanthropic person. Not everybody, of course, but you still get an overwhelming, the public's eye is more positive. But you know as a viewer, and your hero knows as the hero, that he's not that good. And he has other ulterior motives and intentions. Or in some cases, which you could argue with when it comes to Wilson Fisk, he has good intentions. He just has the wrong idea with how to execute them. So we'll see how that plays out. It does worry me a little bit, just because I don't think the MCU always has the best track record when it comes to more political storylines. Not necessarily in the messages they're portraying, but in how heavy-handed they can be at times. You know, because I usually agree with the stuff they're saying, but they don't handle it the most proper way that they should. So I am a little concerned about that, but I have faith in the Daredevil creative team. So the comic book movie, superhero movies section for this week is kind of short. I just had sort of the Daredevil trailer that I wanted to talk about. There's other stuff I could have talked about, but I'm not quite caught up on some of the stuff, so I just have a little to catch up on. But that's totally fine because I got 2 horror movies to discuss this week. One will be more of a quicker just review. Then the other one will be a spoiler top talk that I will have. But first I'm going to talk about Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. I am controversially a defender of this concept of bringing childhood characters and making horror movies, R-rated horror movies, out of them. I'm a defender of that because I enjoy the idea of creating something that you can enjoy for adult reasons while still having the characters you knew and loved as a child. And I think there's some merit to that. Now, you have to do it in the right way. The Mousetrap was the wrong way to do it. No matter which way you try to look at it, that has no reason to be a Steamboat Willie movie. Absolutely no reason. It's baffling. It's everything that's wrong with the idea. It just gives people that hate this idea more fuel for them to hate the concept. And people like me who defend the concept just have to look at a movie like The Mousetrap and just be pissed off at it because it's just giving the detractors more fuel to work with. That being said, if you can find a way to take the lore of a childhood character and actually turn it on its head. Like, The Mousetrap took nothing from the Steamboat Willie lore, and that's the issue. With Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, you don't have that issue. And I'll even say, when it came to the first Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey, it's a terrible movie. But it has more merit than something like The Mousetrap because it does take something with the Winnie the Pooh lore. That being said, it is only in the first 10 minutes and the climax of the movie. And so, right there, that's big storytelling issue. But there's some merit to the fact that they did something with the lore in that movie. And then they just, did nothing with it in the middle of the movie. That made it a terrible movie that I still kind of get fun out of as sort of a sort of tits and schlock Friday the 13th-esque slasher with some Winnie the Pooh lore tacked onto the beginning of the end. And then Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2 was great because that in turn, it's not like you can sit there and pick it apart as a cinephile or something and pick apart little technical issues here and there. But in terms of exploring the lore of the childhood characters and kind of making this horror spin on it, that movie did an amazing job. All of that said, I think Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare is the best one we've had so far in the Poohniverse, in this twisted childhood universe, but also, because we also got to keep in mind, the Mousetrap is not a part of the Poohniverse. It does not belong here, and it should never belong here. But even in this whole trend of childhood characters becoming slasher villains, I still think Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare is probably the best one we've gotten that I can think of. I love how they kind of take the Peter Pan lore and, yes, at least within this movie on its surface, is not really a Peter Pan movie. It's more a crazy guy who thinks he's Peter Pan. And in that sense, you can make the argument, they just tacked on the Peter Pan stuff to sell tickets. And yeah, there's probably some of that there. But with how they interweave the lore into the modern day, it makes sense. How they interweave the lore into this crazy guy's mind and how he perceives of things, it makes sense why you would have the Peter Pan name here, because it's a guy that's obsessed with the Peter Pan story who's also a maniac. And that being said, the way some of the shots are shot, you get some classic Peter Pan imagery, but because it's in a different context, it becomes creepy. Like when you get Peter Pan's shadow at the beginning of the movie, then there's one where he's because I haven't seen the original animated movie in a very long time, but I do remember a scene where he's walking by window and then enters the children's bedroom or whatever, towards the beginning of the movie. And you get something like that here, but the context makes it very worse and less fun because you got a man creeping into a home. So it's kind of horrifying when you think about it. And so they do a good job at interweaving a lot of that Peter Pan lore and mythology, more so in sort of the way the villain thinks, more so than the actual any supernatural elements that are actually taking place. There is sort of a little thing that it's a little unclear. To me, I think they made it, in my opinion, feel like it was sort of in the villain's head. You know, he's a crazy guy. You can't always believe everything, because he's the only person in this particular scene. But there is something somewhat supernatural that happens in one of the scenes. But it's also not a major plot point, and it does kind of just feel like he's imagining it at times. So I can let that slide if that's what it is. Or if they find a way to pay it off, because it can work perfectly well as it's just a crazy guy imagining this supernatural thing happening. But you can also, within the sequels, kind of explain some of it as well. That being said, when it comes to the other side characters from the Peter Pan's lore, I don't think they really hit the nail on the coffin in the right spot for some of them. I think for like the stuff like Wendy and stuff, that was all perfectly fine. But when it came to like Tinkerbell and Captain Hook, I don't think it entirely worked. I liked the idea and concept that they were going for with Tinkerbell. Like, I really do on paper loved the idea that they went for with Tinkerbell. It's a really out there thing, kind of weirdish, and kind of some social commentary-esque thing in there without being heavy-handed. And I did really enjoy it in concept, and I loved the idea. In execution, it feels more awkward than it does horrific. The actor or actress is they're giving it their all, but it does just come off as awkward. And that might have been the intention, but like it never comes off as horrifying, and it never comes off as heroic either. It's just kind of awkward the whole way through. And then the Captain Hook thing, that is something that happens towards the very end, that you need the sequel. We have to watch the sequel to determine how well the Captain Hook stuff is handled, because you don't get any of that here. You just see him. I would give Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare probably 3.5 slices. I want to give it 4 because I really did enjoy it. And something I just forgot to mention. How did I forget this? This is the reason it actually gets it. I would probably give it 4 slices out of 5. And that is the performance of Martin something that plays Peter Pan. He gives a great, sinister, just sinister performance as this child murderer and kidnapper. It's very, very much a disturbing, sinister performance that he nails out of the park. Like, he nails the ball. It goes over, like, standing room only people. It goes over the scoreboard and goes into the lake behind the ballpark. A way I would describe the performance is sort of like this mixture of Pennywise and Heath Ledger's Joker. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's an Oscar-winning performance like Heath Ledger's Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker. It's not. But it is really sinister and scary, and just, it's great. You know, the Pennywise stuff more has to do with the subject matter. Like, it almost took like he took a Pennywise-esque character and gave it the performance of a Heath Ledger-style Joker that I just ate up with how sinister it felt. So yeah, for the performance alone, plus I think from just straightforward direction standpoint, this had a much more clear tone and direction than the previous TCU films did. That being said, there's still room for improvement, for as much as I did love and enjoy this film. So it does get 4 slices out of 5. Probably deserves a little less, maybe 3.5, but I'm giving it 4. Moving on to the bigger release from last week, that being Leigh Whannell's Wolfman. This was my second most anticipated horror movie of the year. So within my top 10, top 5 overall, regardless of genre, I loved everything about Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man to death. It was a big surprise. I absolutely adored it, and I could not wait to see what he would deliver in Wolfman. That being said, this might go down as one of the most disappointing for the year. That being said, I don't think it's a bad movie. I do not think it's a bad movie whatsoever. But it is a very disappointing movie. When you look at Leigh Whannell's past track record, and then you look at this movie, it's not on the same level. What I did enjoy and love about Wolfman was the slow transformation, kind of making more of a Fly-esque body horror movie, more like Cronenberg-esque body horror movie, of watching the transformation pretty much throughout most of the movie, rather than just having one big transformation sequence. And that I did like. I loved the idea and most of the execution, like the body horror transformation stuff within this movie. The execution of all of that was really well handled. That is not the issue with this movie. Even a lot of the werewolf horror and how Leigh Whannell shoots horror and how he shoots this movie and directs this movie, it's really fucking good. And I'm gonna get into spoilers with this. I don't care. It's been out. You should see it. Even though it's disappointing, taper your expectations, but it's worth seeing because the horror side of things is executed very well. Like the sequences, like Leigh Whannell is great. Like The Invisible Man was perfect for stuff like this, but even within this movie, he is perfect at finding ways to make you feel horror and feel tense, even though you're not seeing anything. Like the sequence when they're running from the house to the truck, you're not seeing the wolf. You're hearing certain things, but you're not seeing the wolf. You know he's around, but you don't know where. And so you're getting all these shots of and so you don't even realize it, but in the darkness, you have all these darkness in the background, not in the darkness. Well, darkness as well. But in the background of these characters running and all of this, and the camera, you see all this stuff in the background, and with the sound design even, you know he's out there. You hear a growl from over here, you hear a growl from over there, you hear a little rustling within the leaves over there. It's so brilliant at just capturing sort of the horror aspect without actually seeing the monster. And is executed so well. And also to go along with the sound design, this is something that everyone's been praising, and I praised it when I watched it. I thought they were actually doing something different in this scene originally. I tried to guess what it was, and this is the one moment where it seemed to outsmart me. And that is the whole tarantula scene. You know, when you're hearing the big footsteps, and you think there's this giant monster in the closet. He opens it up, it's just a spider, and his senses are just so heightened that the spider's steps are all just loud bangings to him. The switching perspectives from the werewolf's perspective, he can't understand the humans, and then switching to the human's perspective, who they can't understand what he's saying, and you get, the camera things, they switch perspective without doing a cut. And it works so well. It really does. It works so well. So this is still a really well-made movie on sort of a technical, visual sense. The sound design is amazing. I enjoyed the look of the werewolf even. So all of that was great. And I even liked the opening scene. And I liked the thematics they were going for. But that's also where the film falls for me. Is because you have these good themes that fit perfectly within this story and this concept of not wanting to become what your father is. You don't want to become like your parent. You don't want to become like your father or your parent. And you always have to protect your child as a dad. And you don't want to treat your child the way your father treated you. And there's a lot of that I really enjoyed. And it doesn't bother, I've seen some people say, well, the father wasn't really abusive. And I agree with that. He wasn't abusive. He was overbearing. You agree with sort of the father. He might be a little dick about it at times. But you agree where, you can easily see where the father's coming from. But that's an aspect that I enjoyed. Because it's not always that your parents are coming at it from a bad angle or a bad point of view. Most of the time they're not in the wrong. It's just sometimes they get a little too overbearing about it. But that doesn't make them abusive. But at the same time, you don't want to be that for your child. You don't want to be too overbearing for your child. But you still, a lot of times, find yourselves falling into that trap and becoming overbearing. And that's what this movie explores, and I love that idea and concept within here. The problem is it's too short, basically. Like, it just feels like there's a lot of character moments taken out of the movie. Like, you're told that Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner's characters, their marriage is on the rocks, but you don't actually get to see it that much. You get like one scene in the kitchen when she's on the phone and he's cooking. But outside of that, you just get a scene where they're telling you that their marriage is on the rocks. You don't get to actually see it. You don't get to develop it for yourself as a viewer to see it. And then, likewise, once the actual transformation stuff starts, because in that beginning section, even though they don't explain the relationship between Julia Garner and Christopher Abbott's character and the husband and wife relationship, you do easily get a decent amount of development in that area with Christopher Abbott and his daughter. You know, and how he's sort of the stay-at-home dad. And you can see instances where he is afraid that he'll become like his father, so he has to like tamper his like aggression at times or his anger at times. They don't do the best of job, but they do a decent job developing it in the beginning of the movie. The problem is once the transformation stuff actually starts, you don't get any of that. You don't get any of that. Because at the beginning of the movie, yeah, you get it, but it's not developed enough to last through the whole movie. You still have to see the development from that to where they end up at the end. You see that he's this protective father, protective stay-at-home dad that also wants to be a writer. But you don't develop where he's that to where he's like the wolf man at the end. Like, you physically see him develop, but you don't see the relationship between him and his daughter develop. It just kind of surface level, ooh, he's a wolf now, I have to be afraid of him. It's never like anything deeper than that. And when they try and do stuff, it's just always the same thing. I'm your father, I have to protect you, type of stuff. And I'll always protect you. And like, you get that at the end where he protects her by not attacking her and like slightly holding back from the wolf taking over until Julia Garner shoots him and kills him. And you also get the thing with when you see that the wolf, or the original wolf in that modern storyline, was his father. And so he physically became his father by turning into the wolf. But he also didn't want to become his father. Like, there's a lot there that you can unpack. And it's enough to warrant it being a good thumbs-up movie. But there's not enough development to put it on the same level as Leigh Whannell's other movies. Like, and there's not enough in there to make it end up being one of the best movies of the year. It's just sort of a decently well done movie that takes some swings. They don't pull all of the swings off, but there's a lot of decent fun to be had in the horror elements, in the way it's shot, especially the sound design. And the themes, they hit at times, but like I said, they're not developed enough for you to really, really feel the tragic and tragediness, if that's a word, in the end of the movie. And also, the last shot in the valley with the mountains, I understand what they're going for, but it alludes to a line from the first part of the movie, but it was 1 second line from the first part of the movie that never really felt like an impactful line when you read it or heard it. And then they do that and you're like, oh yeah, he said that, but you didn't develop that theme further of them seeing the mountains, so I don't care about them seeing the mountains. Like I said, overall, it is still a good movie. It's just disappointing. Like, it's a thumbs up. You should definitely check it out and develop thoughts for yourself. But when you compare it to his previous work, it doesn't hold up next to that stuff. So while it is a good movie worth probably 3.5 slices, And now moving into our recommended review, that being Dream Scenario, starring Nicolas Cage. I forgot the director's name, but his last name is Borgley. Yeah, this is from 2023, if I haven't said that already. And this is a movie I remember seeing the advertising for and clips for it and marketing for it. And I thought it looked very interesting and everything, but I just never checked it out. And so when it got recommended to me, I figured I'll go check it out. I remembered the marketing. Like, I knew what he was talking about. I remembered the marketing. I just never got it. I just never went to see it or checked it out. So I checked it out. Now, it's on HBO Max, so I checked it out. It was slightly disappointing, I'll be honest. Kind of like Wolfman in a sense. Obviously, I didn't know this director at all. All I had was the marketing, which I thought looked pretty good. I found it a little disappointing from what I was expecting, but that wasn't until like the third-ish act. I really liked what they were doing with the awkward humor and just the awkwardness of Nicolas Cage's character and just some social handicaps, if you will, that he kind of has as just being the socially awkward man. I find it kind of relatable, and I kind of dug what they were going for, and I liked the more horror elements of like these dream sequences and the fact that he's not actually doing any of it, but everyone is like afraid of him. Like, there's so much stuff you can do within that. Like, you can get I thought they were blending it really well with the awkward comedy, with some of the horror elements of like the dream sequences and everything. And I thought they were doing a really good job with that. It's more how it plays out in sort of the second half, and mainly, especially the third act, where it loses me. Because they try to do this whole thing about cancel culture, which I'm all for, making a movie about all of that stuff. Like, I liked the themes they were tackling, and I liked the premise. Like, this is my main thing, it was an amazing premise that I love. And you're tackling a theme that is good, and I kind of like to see that theme explored in a weird way. But I don't think that theme matches this premise. And the main reason why is nobody that reacts to these nightmares I find believable. Like, the way the world reacts to him. Like, once they start, like, when they're dreams and stuff, and he kind of becomes kind of this weird celebrity that's in random, like, he starts off as like an average Joe that's in everybody's dreams, and he becomes a celebrity out of it. That part I can believe. If that weird thing happened in real life, and everybody was randomly dreaming about the exact same average Joe, I believe that there'd be this weird craze and he'd become a little bit of this viral celebrity. The thing that I don't believe is, like, once they turn into nightmares, I'm sorry. I was in college. Those kids were in college. Even when I wasn't in college and I had a gruesome nightmare, I had like a gruesome nightmare about someone that was close to me or someone that I knew in real life and saw on an everyday basis almost. But I didn't go out and shun that person from my life because it was a fucking dream and a nightmare. And so when you get this whole thing about, like, when they turn into nightmares and everybody is just crazy and like, ooh, we hate you, you're a loser, just go home, become a hermit, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't, like, no one is, like, I could see a couple people reacting that way, but the fact that the entire world just seems to be reacting in this singular way, I find wholly unbelievable. I can see maybe people on the internet getting canceled on Twitter or something. I could believe something like that, but having everybody in his entire life just crumble in on him because of stuff he's doing in other people's dreams that he has nothing to do with. Like, they don't even explore how these dreams are even happening. But, like, if it was him with, like, some weird device that they introduced towards the end even, and he actually, like, had the device, like, he invented the device himself and was actually going in and doing it, that's okay. But that's not what happened. He was just an innocent man. And I get it, like, they don't see it from our perspective, but at the same time, it's still not realistic to sit there and just blame people for stuff they did in your dreams. I don't find that aspect realistic, and it really started to take me out of it. Like, I was on board with it for a little bit, but the more and more it goes on, it's just like, come on, people. When I finished the movie, I thought, ooh, that's a good movie that I enjoyed. But the more I talk about it, the more I dislike it. And most movies that require you to talk about it and require you to think have the opposite effect on me. But this is one of those where the more I talk about it, the more I just don't like what they did. I love the premise. And I kind of like the themes they're tackling. But I don't like tackling those themes with this premise. That's the part where I just don't think it's a good mesh. And because of that, it falls apart. Plus, when you get into the whole Nordio stuff, that felt like a sequel that was just tacked on for no reason. Like, that just felt like the sequel that they didn't think they were going to get the funding for. And so they had to put it here, rush it. They just had to put something here for that. Right now, I'm talking about it, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to give it a lower rating than I was originally going to give it when I started talking about it. I went in wanting to love this movie so much, and I did love it for a large portion. But when you're taking a weird concept and making it feel grounded, people need to react in grounded ways. Like, if you took this weird concept and just went all out, just weirdness with it and just put all the weirdness to the floor, I can get on board with unbelievable reactions from characters, but they took the weird concept and tried to make a grounded movie out of it, and nobody reacts in grounded ways, really, except for the colleague that he works with that lets him eventually sleep in his basement. I mean, that guy reacts like he's the only person that really reacts in believable ways. I guess his family kind of does. I wanted to love this movie so much. I'd have to give this 2.5 slices. It's right down the middle. There are things I absolutely adore, but there's just as many things that I absolutely don't like at all. Yeah. Well, that was this week's Heroes in Horror. Go ahead and share your thoughts on Daredevil, Wolfman, and Peter Pan. And if you've seen Dream Scenario, go ahead and share your thoughts on that as well. And if you have any recommended reviews that you'd like to hear my thoughts on, you can drop them down below. I have a list that I'll probably choose from for next week. But if someone drops a comment, that will get first priority as well. That being said, go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you like superheroes, if you like horror movies. Go ahead and do that. And hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Hit the dislike if you hated my thoughts on these 3 movies and 1 trailer. And go ahead and hit the notification bell so you don't miss another Heroes in Horror episode. And always remember that one man's shit is another man's art, and vice versa.